thanks to the improvements of the capability for the testing, and we either distort those suspected cases or confirmed the cases, and then the patients may have more
if we look at the numbers today,
and also
we have
may
discovered
have more
that the number
people
of
they can
suspected
go back to their
patients
normal life if they are considered as normal
dropped.
and they are discharged from the suspected cases. Similar story happens in China and in Hubei province. As for the new death cases, we also have certain number. We also have the decreased number. Next, I would like to give the floor to Madam Guo Yanhong to.
Normal life. This trend is identical in Hubei province as well as in the world, and we also see a decline of number of deaths. Right now, let's give the floor to Ms. Guo Yanlong to talk about the 5th edition of the diagnosis and treatment plan of onco-pneumonia. Since the outbreak of the epidemic, in order to strengthen the treatment and diagnosis of onco-pneumonia, we stick to the 4 early, that is early identification, reporting, isolation, diagnosis, and treatment. And we also conducted collective treatment of the patient, medical resources, as well as medical professionals. And we have strengthened our treatment to the confirmed cases, especially the severe cases, studying the characteristics of these disease and discuss the plausible and effective measures. And now a month has passed, we have known better about the epidemiology of this disease, and we have also gathered some experiences. So we have made 4 adjustments for 4 times of the treatment plan, and this is the 5th edition, which is actually a combination of many of the experiences we have gathered in our practice in clinic. This is beneficial for us to improve the recovery rate and reduce mortality rate. In this edition, we focus on, first of all, the science of it. We respect the objective rules of this disease and observe and make prudent decisions and consensus on the current evidence of this disease. And second, we also take into consideration the practicability of the measures, combines TCM and Western medicine, and guide the clinical practice. And third is to prioritize. During this revision, we have given priority to the treatment of severe and critical cases and optimize the plans in order to improve the efficacy of treatment in order to reduce mortality. Right now, in the 5th edition, compared to the 4th edition, we have made revisions in the following 3 aspects. First is that we now have a clearer understanding of the epidemiology, and we also have a more detailed analysis of these epidemic. We also have further more detailed categorization of the patients, so light syndrome, general patients, severe cases, and critical cases, and these are the current categorization of the patients. And third revision is that we have enriched the methods and pedagogy and methodology of treatment, and there are more detailed categorization of the treatment plans, which make it more useful in clinical practices. With the deepening of our understanding, we'll continue to optimize the treatment plan, include new concepts, methods, and measures into this plan so as to further strengthen the treatment diagnosis of the patients. Now the floor is open to questions. Our panel of speakers will be taking questions on the treatment of the disease as well as the logistics and of the materials. With CMG and CCTV, my question is, compared to the previous edition, in the 5th edition, we have added another category called the light syndrome patients. So what is the significance of doing so? With the improvement of our diagnostic capacity, we have taken notice that for some light syndrome patients, they even don't show symptom of typical pneumonia. It might be a little fever, fatigue, and coughing, but no heavy pneumonia syndrome. So despite the light syndrome, this patient is still infectious. That's why we have listed it into the first category in the patients. This patient must also be isolated, and this is to further control the source of the infection and to give more detailed explanation of the syndrome of the patients. With China Education Television, according to the 5th edition, the asymptomatic patient might also be infectious, which might constitute a challenge for the body temperature checkpoints because they might not be used as a standard to judge whether a person is risky. So if I've never been to Hubei province, can I still take public transport? If I cough, would I be isolated at the point? For asymptomatic people, mainly they are close contact of the confirmed cases, family members, and close friends. For the asymptomatic patients, we have a definition that he did not show typical clinical symptoms. However, if we do the nasopharyngeal swabs, he still shows positive result in terms of the nucleic test. He might also be infectious because he carries the coronavirus with him or her, and he might cause transmission. But these patients also typically show light syndrome, so he carries a relatively small amount of virus with him. Therefore, his capability of transmit might be weaker than the severe cases. So if you cough, will be isolated. Well, in terms of diagnosis of infectious disease, we focus more on the epidemiology of a patient instead of the symptoms alone. I don't think it's necessary to put some people into quarantine just because he or him coughed. The China News Agency, there's a very severe shortage of masks. What kind of measures will we be taking to boost the supply? The scarcity of medical resources is a matter of public concern. The NDRC, according to the requirement of the States Council's joint prevention and control measures, we're pulling all efforts to address this issue, the undersupply of masks. In terms of supply, we are encouraging people and manufacturers to restore their productivity and improve the production of the masks. According to available statistics, as of February the 3rd, in 22 provinces, the total daily production has amounted to 14 million, which is up by 3.1% day on day. And it's also, in terms of N95, the total production amounts to 116,000. And for the other kinds of masks, it is up by 36%. And the daily production amounts to 4.1 million. So the production is going up, and we now give priority to the masks that are sent to the front line. In terms of the overcapacity risk, for the overcapacity part, after the epidemic have passed, the government will be in charge of recover them. So we encourage all of the manufacturers to improve their productivity at this time. And also, we have guidance to give guidance to the public on the proper way of using the mask. So N95 is mainly for medical workers. For the general public, we suggest that you leave these scarce medical resources to the frontline medical workers. We also call for our friends from the press to improve the publicity of the knowledge in this regard. With the Renmin net, and the confirmed patients is still increasing in terms of Hubei province. So there's still an undersupply of medical resources at the front line. So can you tell us more about the numbers of the goods and materials sent to Hubei and how to address this undersupply? After the joint prevention control mechanism was established, the MIT is leading the group of goods and materials, and we have organized the restoration of the necessary materials in order to further meet the demand of the front line. As of February the 4th, altogether we have transported 210 million thousand protection suits to Wuhan, and the leading group, logistic group of the National Leading Center, we have transported major materials such as masks, protection suit, as well as negative pressure wards. We have also sent a special inspection team to supervise the production, transportation, and allocation of these key medical materials. We have built a system and an enclosed cycle administration of this production of these materials. Upon arrival, we also see to it that these goods and materials are transported to the places where they are most needed. With CMG and CCTV, in this new edition of a treatment plan, and the standard of diagnosis is first of all fever and other pneumonia symptoms. So does that mean we are expecting a rise of the rise of the numbers of suspected cases? In terms of light syndrome patient, we discover that they might show symptom of fever. So we have revised it into fever and respiratory symptoms. And this is to discover or identify the patient as soon as we can. In terms of the possibility of increasing the number of suspected cases, I think that's a possibility. But we believe it's useful to rule out some of these cases. I think it's a good thing for us to strengthen the prevention and control. With Shenzhen TV, Shenzhen Customs and Guangzhou Customs are now streamlining the importing process of the much-needed medical materials. So, do the general customs have any measures to expedite the clearance procedure at the customs? The General Customs Administration, according to the instructions of the State Council, have made multiple measures to expedite the clearance processes. First of all, in the customs nationwide, we have set up a special window and grate channel to handle these cases and in order to expedite the clearance process of the much-needed medical materials. So for the donations from overseas, we try to expedite the ratification process. And we also have made an announcement on the 6th that for these donation, the customs can let them clear the customs and do the registration and application later. We also have set up a hotline, and we have sent personnel to stay on call to answer the questions in a timely manner. And on the 27th, we have also made more specific measures in terms of the clearance for the much-needed drugs and medical equipment when they were going through the customs, including those that were sent through mail. We have made sure that they are given quick access through the customs. According to statistics, as of the 25th of January to today, the total clearance is 171,000 batches. Coming up, the General Customs will continue our efforts in this regard and help the enterprises to address the problems they're facing right now and setting plans in order to serve the development of these enterprises and curb the transmission of the epidemic at the customs and docks. With Economic Daily, in the new edition of treatment plan, in terms of the standard of diagnosis, the radiology judgment is ruled out. So, what is the reason of this revision? In its 5th edition, we have added one point that for the patients in Hubei province, in order to improve the diagnostic capability at the grass level, these medical institutions might not have these radiology or CT machines. So this kind of screening and the revision of these diagnostic standard is for us to make judgment in a quicker way and a more expedited way.
感谢主持人。生命时报记者提问。首先第一个问题，瑞德西韦药物最近引起大家的关注。
First of all, the drug remdesivir has already been transported into China and is now going to clinical trial. So, what kind of clinical effect are we expecting before we put it into real clinical practices? And the Wuhan pharmacy research have already decided that this drug is useful, but so why don't we use it sooner rather than later? We actually have replied to that question in yesterday's press conference. From fundamental research to clinical trial, a drug has to go through a certain path, and all of these processes have to meet all of the ratification standard of the government. And we are getting no more information of this drug as of now.
谢谢主持人。中国国门时报记者提问。我们注意到。
We've taken notice that the General Customs have released the numbers of the imported disease control materials. So can you tell us more about information in this regard? I actually have reported the imported materials, some of the basic numbers. Generally speaking, since the 24th of January, in terms of categorization of its imported goods, about 77% are protective gears, totally amounts to 370 million, and more than 900 million yuan, among which 3.8 million are protection suits and 820,000 are protective glasses, and also 390,000 medical pieces of medical equipment. And general trades account for 60%. And the donation accounts for 23%, totaling 88 million pieces, including masks, which is about 70 million, and 1.5 million protection suits, and 330,000 pair of protective glasses. So each day we're importing a large amount of protective materials, which is about 150 million yuan on a daily basis. So coming up, the General Customs will continue to strengthen our collective the information and make those statistics public, and also work coordinately with the Joint and Prevention Control Mechanism partners, work closely with the other departments to play to our strength and expedite the transportation of the much-needed medical materials to the epicenter.
主持人好，封面新闻记者提问。我们从昨天的发布会上了解到，
With cover news,
出院标准其实是高于
yesterday we have come to notice that the discharge standard of Wuhan is higher than that of the other places in the country. So after the issue in the 5th edition, will we have a general discharge standard for all places, including Wuhan? In terms of discharge standards from the 1st edition to the 5th edition, it is a general principle, general standard, which means that for all of the patients in medical institutions, we apply to the same discharge standard. But in the 5th edition, there are several aspects. First is that your body temperature is back to normal for 3 days, for 3 consecutive days, and the lighten of respiratory symptoms, and 2 negatives in the nucleic test, as well as the absorption of phlegm, of inflammation internally. So there is no second standard in Hubei province.
这边这位靠这边的这位男记者，对。
你好，我是香港然后电视台的，请问一下，最近2天新增的重症病人
In the recent 2 days, we see a rise of severe cases. The total number has exceeded 400, and it is up by 160%. So can you explain to us why there's a sharp increase? Are they light syndrome turning into heavy or severe syndrome, or are they admitted as severe cases? So we've understand that the nasopharyngeal swabs shows positive, but their feces samples shows negative results. What do you do with such kind of situation? We see a sharp increase in terms of severe symptoms, severe cases. And we see also a rise of confirmed cases and a reduction of suspected cases, which shows that we are speeding up the diagnosis of the suspected cases. So with the rise of numbers of confirmed cases, so comes the rise of the severe cases. This is a positive correlated with each other. And for your second question, for some patients, they might start with a high fever, but the bigger percentage of patients start with very light syndromes or low fever. So for these patients, in the first week, they might have light syndrome, but after a week, there might be a deterioration in terms of the symptoms. For the time of the deterioration, mostly it happened on day 9 to day 12. So basically, the syndrome would tend to deteriorate after 1 week of diagnosis. I think this will come of use to us in terms of diagnosis and treatment of these patients. In the 4th edition, we have already included the test of feces into one of the standard, which include the testing of nasopharyngeal swabs, blood, feces. All of this can be included in the testing. This is not a new content added in the 5th edition.
谢谢主持人，新京报记者提问。我们也关注到这个第5版的这个诊疗方案里面，在这个传播。
We've taken notice that in the 5th edition, in terms of the transmission channel, is slightly different than the 4th edition. In the 4th edition, it describes that droplets and contact are the 2 forms of transmission, and it also in the 5th edition it adds the digestive channels as well as aerosol transmission. So what are the considerations of adding these 2 points into the description of transmission channel? In terms of ways of transmission, we have made a slight adjustment, which is based on clinical trials, clinical practices. For most cases, it is transmitted to the respiratory tract or contact. However, as Mr. Li just said, we also have detected positive result when we are doing testing on the feces. So this rendition and adjustment is made based on the clinical trials in order to guide the trials in turn. Aerosol transmission is common in terms of respiratory infectious disease. But we are not still very sure about the digestive transmission, including the fact that we have discovered active virus in the feces, so people are worried about the gastronomy transmission. So we have included these 2 points, but add 1 point that we are not 100% certain in terms of these 2 ways of transmission, and further adjustment or revision might also be made in the future.
感谢主持人。中国新闻网记者提问。还是想问一下关于口罩的问题。我们注意到，其实网上现在
Still a question about the masks.
这个口罩紧缺的问题。另外
There are a lot of discussion online about the shortage of masks.
有不少的
In terms of social donation, a large number of the masks.
针对目前口罩极为紧缺的情况，捐赠物资中的口罩是否能够发挥有效的作用？谢谢。
Goes to the front line. So I still want to ask the shortage about the masks, and will these masks go to the places where they're most needed? Since the outbreak of this disease, people from all walks of life, international institutions and overseas Chinese and the government, foreign governments have pulled a synergy together in assistance of the epicenter. We felt their support for us, which is heartening. The medical mask is a much needed medical resources and important to the protection of our frontline medical workers. So we are coordinating this resources. We have made we have to make comprehensive arrangement, making sure that these key resources can play to their much needed function. So for masks and protective suits, we are doing all we can to make sure that these problems in terms of in process of transportation is timely addressed. After they were transmitted to Hubei province, we will make timely allocation of these resources. And for donations coming from overseas, we would transport them through chartered plane so that they can be transported directly to the Tianhe airport of Wuhan. And for smaller amounts of donation, they will be transmitted to to experts such as Beijing Capital Airport, and then speedily transport those materials to Wuhan.
各位领导好，北京日报记者提问。目前那个网上相继有媒体爆出
With
咱们的这个医疗物资
Beijing
存在
Daily,
一些短缺的问题，不知道现在国家在这方面有没
I
有
still want to ask about the shortage of medical materials and what are the measures to address this shortage of medical materials. During this special time, it is important for us to guarantee the quantity and quality of the medical resources, of the medical materials. Right now, important medical materials such as masks and protective suits are still in short supply. In order to ensure the supply, our group has established a daily targeted demand and supply system and modulation system to encourage enterprises to enlarge their capacity and increase their production and ensure the sufficiency of their production factors. Take protective suits, for example. It has grown from 87,000 to 316,000 now. So we are still trying to make up for the gap.
还有吗？好，今天呢，感谢各位记者对我们的诊疗方案第5版，还有医疗。
Thank you for your interest in the 5th edition of the treatment plan, as well as the logistic issues of the medical materials. Tomorrow we will also be here to hold the Joint Prevention Control Mechanism of State Councils press conference. You can take notice on our website, or you can also send your questions through emails so that we can give you a timely answer. That's it for today's press conference. Thank you for joining us.